Friday. It feels weird doing a session on a Friday and also 2 days in a row, but thank you for joining us. Whether you watched our regular updates session yesterday or whether you're joining us afresh, my name is Luan. This is Andy. Should we just dive straight into this topic today without intros, or?
Oh, we should do an intro.
Shall we do an intro? We should do an intro. Okay, so today, together, we are talking about AI, creativity, and the new rules of social media. And we're coming at this topic because you may know that we regularly talk about social media, trends, updates, feature changes, but a core thread that has been running through that for the last years now has been about AI, powered features, external tools. So we're coming together today, and I will talk about our roles in a second, to kind of share our thoughts on this topic specifically as a bit of a kind of 30-ish minute deep dive. My day-to-day role is I'm a marketing consultant. I work directly with clients, advising, coaching, training as well, and I write on this topic. And I may have briefly mentioned, if you've seen me before, working on a number of different writing projects at the moment, and they do involve AI, the topic, and of course, social media, but also we're going to dive into, towards the end of the session, around kind of IP and data privacy as well. So looking forward to sharing a little bit of what else I've been working on as we go through.
Love it. Well, you're the perfect person to partner with on this. And if we've not yet met before, I'm Andy, spent my lifetime building social media products, watching AI evolve. We built our first AI app on GPT-3 back in 2021. So I've been working with this stuff for a while. And since the company I co-founded, Content Cal, got acquired by Adobe, I've been deep in working on AI powered tools. We'll touch around kind of, as you mentioned, Luan, about IP. I've gone deep into IP. I'm no lawyer, no deep expert on this, but the way that AI is changing creativity, seeing this from like the forefront or the foremost creative company at Adobe, it's been fascinating to watch how AI is shaping things. So I want to talk, not going to spoil all the fun, not going to spoil it all up front, but yeah, I really want to dive into like these three evolving things that are happening right now, which is the evolution of AI, which is where we're going to start. We're going to talk about shifting social media consumption behaviors. We dove right into that yesterday, didn't we? We went really deep into that, but we'll kind of touch on that more of a kind of an AI lens today. And then really interested to dig into the evolving role of marketers. And really what we want to get from this session is just have a good discussion into what do we think like the future of marketing and the skill sets that are going to be required as we go into 2026. So that's the aim for today. Anything else you want to add before we dive in, Luan?
No, I don't think so. Do say hello in the chat. I'm not sure whether we'll get time for questions, but do pop them in because we can keep an eye on the conversation after the event and respond to anything as well. But we haven't pre-planned our discussion on this. Obviously, we've put slides together, but we haven't shared thoughts with each other. So we are very much doing this kind of live and on the hoof, as you may know that we do that anyway. But just a quick plug for those of you that haven't seen this. If not, how come you haven't? We are hosting a real life event in London on November the 12th, so just over 2 weeks away to go. AI will be part of the conversation. Social media is part of the conversation. It is the only event that is solely focused on B2B. So you're not listening to B2C examples and then trying to think about how to apply them, or just going, yeah, that's really nice, but not for me. This is B2B practitioners, presentations, fireside chats, panel discussions. And I think we've both been doing prep for those this morning as well. So I'm really excited to see them come to life in a couple of weeks.
Indeed, cannot wait for that. And this just feels like it's even more important to be elevating the role of social media, particularly in B2B right now, given all the stuff that we're about to talk about.
Yes.
So let's start. So 3 trends we're going to look into today, and we're going to discuss implications, what that all means. The slides are pretty dense. We'll be sharing these slides out anyway, so totally fine with you taking this deck. So feel free to read along as I talk through it. But I think the most important thing for us to think about, right, and also one of the most challenging things, is our need to remain open-minded about how tools evolve and what tools are useful for and when. Right. So I don't want to dive straight into tools because it's all about fundamentals first. So this is something I've been thinking about for a while, like this AI hype cycle that we're in at the moment. And typically it's the way you can see a lot of things like playing out. Any new technologies typically plays out in this way. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with the terminology from like innovators, early adopters through to laggards. It was from a book called Crossing the Chasm, really important book that talks about technology adoption over time. And typically what happens is like we get a lot of like hype and promise in the early days. We hit like peak hype cycle, which we're kind of in now, probably been in for the last 3 years, I would say 22 to 25. You know, we're all getting like bombarded with everything AI. Get that. And it also can feel like a bit overwhelming, just gets the whole promise starts to fall flat because we just hear it so much. Anyway, but the point is that there's a asymmetry between where the hype is and where the utility is. And what we're just getting to is in that kind of crossover point where like all of the hype and all the furore will start to calm down, but real utility is growing. And I think this is the bit that now becomes really interesting. You know, roll the clock back, even 6 months, a year ago, you know, AI generated video content creation, for example, was absolutely awful. But now it's in a place that it's genuinely useful and it's got high degrees of utility. Things are evolving very quickly. So we're evolved from like lots of like, oh, that's cool, like interesting tools into no, there's genuine workflows that we can now apply. We're basically crossing that chasm where the early majority are getting the advantage because they are the ones that are getting on board with using AI tooling the right way. We'll talk about what the right way means in a second. But now utility is actually catching up to the hype. And I think this is precisely the point why we're having this conversation today. So
and that hype, you know, the hype, if we're honest about it, it brings excitement, it brings all shiny new things we can have a look at, it brings fear, it brings overwhelm, all of those things. But we have seen these cycles before. This isn't anything new to AI. We saw this with social media, we've seen it with other tech coming through. This is just happening a lot faster than ever before. You know, ChatGPT broke records, Sora has broken records over the last few weeks. Should also just put into context that AI is not just for marketing. Obviously, this is our day jobs and how we see it, but some recent research from OpenAI, actually people are using ChatGPT more now for, you know, home research, personal relationship advice, what to cook from their fridge. So there are so many uses of this technology, but let's bring it back to our day jobs, what we're doing. Yes, this chart is specifically about content marketing. That is not all that we do, but it's really clear how over the last 3 years, our use of AI tools has grown significantly. So these 3 bar charts are 2023, 2024, 2025 in red. Massive leaps in terms of for content, how marketers are using AI, from generating ideas, writing headlines, writing social media posts. Potentially, I would see this as a quick win. We won't, you know, we'll talk about IP and quality, but we've all heard the term AI slop now, and you see LinkedIn posts where, oh, you can really recognize an AI generated piece of content too easily. So this has moved again, almost that cycle from, oh, this is an exciting tool, to a little bit of laziness and slop and kind of looking for quality coming out the other end. So it is a great tool for marketing. There is many uses for it, but what we want to look at today is going beyond this. Let's whack a question into ChatGPT, get our LinkedIn post out and copy and paste it. That is good. It does work if you amend it and edit it, add a human lens to it, but there is so much more we can be doing. We can take it from task assistant to strategic partner. And I've seen many articles almost talk about these AI tools as like your intern, and how you're briefing it and prompting it like an intern and giving it background information, how even some very large organizations now are recruiting at higher levels because AI can take over the entry-level roles and tasks. So that old approach that we've started to see shift from AI, as we just said, like being that task approach, like write me some captions, create me some content. The opportunity lies at the next level of thinking, where you can actually start to say, okay, let's input some data, some caveats around that, input some data and look for the things that were kind of too big for us to do as humans. The big volumes of data, the really deep questions that would take a specialist analyst like hours and hours to do. Like, let's go and look for those patterns. We need to ask the right questions. But for example, put in your customer feedback forms and ask for the key themes and the questions and the challenges and the pain points. Like, that would have seemed so huge a task to do before. You can now use these tools to do it quicker, deeper, almost real time as well. And that's where it starts to get exciting. That's where it can become that like strategic partner, add insights and allow us to scale, but not just about outputs.
This is the bit that I get most excited about, right? I think there's a phrase I often have in my mind as it relates to where we are at right now, in AI and marketing in general. It's like, we've never had it so good, but we've also never had it so hard. Right? It's, I make no bones about it. Like, it is bewildering to be marketing right now. It's we are bombarded with tools, new processes, things we could do. The art of the possible, and our scope and surface area of opportunity has just dramatically increased. Whilst it's amazing opportunity, right? We're not hamstrung by our ability to code, our ability to create video, our ability to do like data analysis and business intelligence work. We've got all of these capabilities now, which is like a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because we got amazing opportunity, great surface area of opportunity to explore. But also it's like bewildering because you're like, I've got to shift my mental model from like, this is how I operated today into how I need to operate tomorrow. And, and that shift doesn't need to happen overnight. It's not always absolute. And it starts by thinking about, all right, the fundamental part of being in marketing is always understand your audience as deeply as you possibly can. Audience empathy has not gone anywhere. If anything, even more important. So that is where it should always start. That's like the fundamental, non-changing foundational truth of marketing. Those who understand their audience the best will typically win. So now we have unbelievable tools that we can use for free to get that level of insight from our market, from our customers, from our competitors, and put it into one big mixing pot. All we need to do, whilst I make it sound easy, but it is a skill set, is ask really intelligent questions of that data, like surface the surprising insights. So imagine you've put all of this stuff in ChatGPT or Claude or whatever your chosen LLM is, operate kind of similar. You've put all of those insights from customer, your market, and competitors. Ask questions like, what are the surprising things in this data that I haven't noticed before? What are the things that our competitors are doing that I'm not? All of these things give you an opportunity to explore different areas that we just wouldn't have the ability to do before, right? So, and that's the bit I'm incredibly excited about. As we got at the bottom of this slide here, it's like the old days of like saying, oh, marketing is guesswork, intuition. It's getting to a point now where it's kind of irresponsible not to use AI to understand data at scale so that we can build better marketing strategies as a result. It's still going to be led by us, as like, we've got the strategic vision to this. We're not going to hand that over to AI, but we do need to think more deeply about business insight, is my kind of call to action here. You agree?
And completely. But there's also that thing about, you say, ask it the questions and interrogate it and things like that. But sometimes we don't know what we don't know. But this is also where it's really cool, because you can actually say, this is what I've got. What questions do you have for me about this? I did a really simple exercise where I actually put into it, someone on my leadership team has asked me about this. I'm not sure what questions I should be asking them. What questions should I go back to them with? So if you don't know what you don't know and don't know those questions to ask AI, and then role play with it. Tell it about your customer and say, what do you think my customer would think about, or what questions do you think I should go back? Like, use it as that strategic sparring partner. Don't have that fear that, but I don't know what to ask it. I don't know those questions. You can use it for that purpose as well as getting the data insights, and ask it what it means. Ask it for the key takeaways. Ask it for what I should present to the board or to a financial director, and talking language. So the opportunity of this is great. It is technology. We still need to add that human level of thinking. And the reason I think the AI slop word has come about is because maybe people are thinking that the thinking's not needed.
And that is such an important point. And I think the thing I haven't actually verbalized as well is that whilst I get all excited about, how it's going to help us aggregate and synthesize bucket loads of insights so that we can inform, our strategies, I think the fundamental thing, though, is that that doesn't stop our responsibility of having a real deep understanding of our audience in the first place, right?
Yeah.
How do we know the outputs are good from ChatGPT or wherever, unless we've had conversations directly with customers and go, actually, I can pattern match between the convos I've had directly in communities, directly with customers. So now I can start to see the correlation and think, actually, you know what? That has surfaced some interesting insights. And I know broadly it's on, the right direction. And that's the point. It's that we need to use it to empower us more strategically than typically marketers are doing today. But that does mean, though, that we have the responsibility of making sure that we can keep AI honest in terms of its outputs, because we can't sub out like true knowledge, because that is what we have to have directly as well, to make sure that AI can pass all this information, but it's still passing it in a way that is completely accurate and we understand. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think the thing that you and I always agree on and come back to is, like, you can't shortcut the fundamentals. This is a tool, this is a technology. Go back, I've been studying marketing for over 20 years. You still need to know your target audience, your product, your service, your competitors, all those things. You can't skip it or shortcut it.
Yeah.
But sometimes people do.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so AI shifting, that's changing. We get that, but utility is growing, and 2026 is the time that we really start to evolve our usage away from like task into more strategy. That's kind of takeaway from point one. So point two is about shifting consumption trends. I find this fascinating. We're all such nerds for this stuff, right? And what's old is new again, and it's often the way that just life is cyclical. So we'll take a little journey back in time. Social 1.0. So this is internet in the early 90s. Sadly, you and I are old enough to remember having to plug in modems into phone connections. I was explaining this to my kids the other day, and they were like, "What?"
And that you couldn't use a landline at the same time.
Sadly, yes. But like, you remember from those early days of like online message boards, those smaller forums, those smaller communities, basically interest-based corners of the internet where people would hang out and spend time. Obviously, that evolved to MSN Messenger, etc. So those kind of smaller chats around particular subject matter areas of interest is basically where social started, right? Message boards, forums, etc. Then social 2 was, started maybe 2006, 2007. You could probably say around MySpace time. It's really Facebook that made the social graph the thing, right? So that created a whole new paradigm of fame, which is interesting. It became us all like fighting to get the most amount of followers. It's all a big popularity contest ultimately. And as we're still kind of in that kind of social 2, we feel like we're getting to the end of this second phase of social. And, and I think the thing that's accelerating it, quite frankly, is how TikTok has shaken up algorithmic shaking up social graph based discovery into algorithmic based discovery. We've been speaking about it in our roundups for the last couple of years, this declining trend of the importance of followers. This is nothing new, we all know that. But then the kind of next evolution is this, and we touched on this briefly yesterday, is that, this is the bit where social kind of starts to transform into just entertainment-led content. Because as TikTok has popularized the recommendation based algorithm, and now we started to see more and more AI generated content. Now we've got platforms like OpenAI's Sora, the app, right? So top of the App Store charts, which is all AI generated content, as we know. Obviously, we make yourself the hero of that content if you wish, but ultimately all AI generated, and obviously Meta Vibes, which is basically one big AI slop fest. But it just goes to show, though, how social is changing. The writing's on the wall, it feels like, whereby, all right, so social media platforms have already said, you know what, we're better at finding content that you will enjoy than you are, right? Because social graphs not so important, because we have proven, I'm speaking as a platform here, we've proven that time and again, if we serve you content, you'll spend more time on the platform. Hence the reason that recommendation algorithms have taken over. But of course, what we're starting to see, and this is where Meta has started to bring in like their own content bots, which produce AI generated content and drive loads of views, all feels a bit weird to me. But ultimately, it is AI generated content served by an AI generated algorithm, and us as a human become the dumb consumer of it, right? And that is typically where this is headed. And the biggest challenge, that final thing I'll say on this, the biggest challenge that social platforms have had is about the quality of content. And I mentioned this yesterday on the call, is that where I see this headed is that if a platform can't get enough humans to create the content which will keep people entertained on the platforms will just create it themselves, and the platforms themselves become content creators. So they all become entertainment consumption based platforms, not creation based. Now that is a future that does not excite me, I'll be brutally honest, but you kind of see where this is going. And that then creates, going to social 3.0 is how I see this evolving over the next 3 to 5 years, probably less than that. Is that there's going to be a splintering. The reverse trend is more about, again, back to the kind of micro communities, smaller spaces where trust is the currency that is the most important thing that we don't trade in these platforms, right? So, and I think that is where the kind of human depth, the authentic relationships, the things that we've spoken about loads that all sound a bit cliche now we've said it so much, that is where social will still be. There's still an innate human desire for connections. It's just the fact that those big gargantuan platforms have shifted gears into becoming so much more entertainment led, that we're actually starting to see the splinter effect where more micro communities, smaller groups, not about fame, but about depth of conversation. So that's kind of the way I see this going. I find this particular trend fascinating. Sorry for the long narrative, but Luan.
I just think there's so many elements to this, isn't there? It's like it relates tech and human behavior as well, because the more we're shown things that we go, oh yeah, that's interesting, the less likely we are to go and seek out those sources for ourselves. So, we've been through the phase of volume and followers. How many people consciously can say they sit and go, I'm going to go and find some new people to follow, break out of my own filter bubble or echo chamber or whatever. Hey, I don't even need to now, because the algorithms are just going to do it all for me. And actually what they're serving is all right. And I'm just going to keep scrolling through it. So again, it's kind of, one of those cycles. The way that we are overcoming that is by finding the niche communities where we're adding human value to it, which I know we're going to keep talking about. But this whole concept of the platforms using AI to create content just makes me shudder, thinking we've already seen this with those LinkedIn collab articles. And a couple of people are putting in the comments like, things are wrong, they need checking. For me, those LinkedIn collab articles that were AI generated first, and then they were inviting people to comment on them, There was no expert sense check on those. They were incorrect. I'm not a lawyer, but there was legally, factually incorrectness around them all. So there's a massive danger and red flag in my eyes of, we've already seen it. Yes, things have progressed significantly, but we still need that human eye, that interrogation, that questioning, the critical thinking. And ultimately it does come back to trust. And do we trust these AI tools yet? I don't think we quite do. We're seeing them as productivity volume hacks versus getting the real value out of them that they could be used for.
I think, that the notion or mental model for us to all apply with AI is great, and as like bullish as I am with AI, it's like verify then trust.
Yeah,
it's basically the way we need to switch our mindset. But fully.
Yeah, and we talked about those layers yesterday around like search. We've got social search, AI search, Google search effectively. Even if you're using your AI tools as search, you're then going to another source to verify them. So it's not, none of these are working in isolation. We're just adding more and more layers to what we do. I remember the days of marketing when, you didn't get involved in any tech. That was a different team, or not even necessarily in-house. We can do these things, but that's also what makes it such a big role now.
Yeah, absolutely. But personalities, human relationships are still, they're still the foundations, like we saw in Foundation and Trend 1, which is that those that understand their customers the best win. This is still inherently human at its core, despite what might be happening at a macro level. There's still innate human desires, and so long as we sell products to humans or market our products to humans, then there is a role for this. We just need to be more mindful about, our opportunity in kind of more middle of the road generic content. It's just not going to fly anymore, right? We need something that truly creates some kind of deeper, more meaningful connection. And on that basis, I'm going to touch on this only very quickly because I wrote a whole book on this, and this is not meant as a book plug. This is more like the way that I see the world and how important, again, these foundational concepts are for the future of marketing. Again, these are non-changing things. This is not rocket science thinking here. Of course, it's not, because it's me, and I'm definitely not a rocket scientist. But this is about how to grow a brand that becomes first to mind, which is that's our ultimate goal. When someone has a problem or a challenge, needs a solution, you're top of that list. Now, there's obviously a bunch of ways of doing that, but one of the most important ways is like creating a word of mouth engine around your brand. Now, irrespective of what happens in AI, and in fact, AI has actually accelerated this. As we know, LLMs pull from the sentiment that's already happening on the web. So the larger your share of voice is, the more likely you're going to be cited on AI overviews or in LLMs, right? It's pretty simple. There's a lot of people selling snake oil at the moment as it relates to like AI focused discovery. The fact is, if you're spoken about more than your competitors, when people are searching, best product for X, you're going to be surfaced too, is a general rule of thumb. But these kind of 6 spheres that I talk about, which when I talk about like human relationships, deeper, more meaningful, word of mouth, yada, yada, there's a kind of process to do this, which starts from your advocates, the people that use your product. These are the people that should be writing reviews, etc. Then you've got the evangelists, which are the people that really care about your mission, your values. Do everything you can to support those folk and try and amplify as many of those as possible. When we were building Content Cal, I tried to give as many of these people like platforms or opportunities as possible, whether it's inviting them to webinars, inviting them onto certain experiences, in-person meetups, whatever it might be. Do everything you can to make people feel connected to your business, so they're more likely to evangelize for you. Work deeply in communities. Again, this is all about like everything I've been speaking about forever, which is like whether it's across Reddit, whether it's on Substack, whether it's Discord, wherever. The more communities you're part of, there is a kind of a twofold impact of that. One, you spend time in the communities where your audience frequent. Again, going back to like 3.0, right? This is where people are spending their time, right? This is where trust reigns supreme. find your time in there. But the more time that you spend in those communities, there's more opportunity then for your content to be surfaced through AI search and AI overviews. Then the final three are kind of a bit more into the like traditional kind of influencers type of stuff, specialist creators, which are kind of more niche and nano influencers, category leaders, your macro. And not forgetting, you know, if you're, depending on who you're selling to, if you're in kind of like higher ticket sales, these domain experts are often the, you know, the kind of Forrester or Gartner or G2. These are the kind of ones that I pay attention to in like the tech world that I'm in. This is often things that won't influence the entire buyer journey, but they're kind of the stamp of approval at the end. But ultimately, these are the kind of 6 key vectors to build trust around your brand and build word of mouth. So anyway, that's the concept of it. And I think, you know, thinking like that is something that, irrespective of industry that you operate in, obviously my lens is very kind of like B2B SaaS is where I've been, but across industries, Bill, I mean, I'm interested in your take as well, because this is obviously just my mental model here, Luan.
Well, I do highly recommend this book because I had a preview of it and I loved this model, because I think all too often when we talk about influencers, it's done about the number of followers. And of course, we know that nano influencers can have more trust and bigger relationships, you know, versus celebrities. But I love that you've broken it down into like what it means and how they influence, rather than it just being about the numbers. So this is what's so key for me about this model, and understanding that this is what people respond to as well. You know, who do we trust in our networks? Do we go to our friends and family first? Do we go to our peers? I'm sure we've all got someone, you know, I often message you, Andy, going, oh, I'm looking for this. Who do you know? You know, that's who you turn to, versus search sometimes as well. So this human element is really key.
Love it.
So our third trend, this is a really interesting one, and obviously something that I've seen through working in marketing for many years, is just how, I'll use the term skill set, like what we do as a marketer just keeps on changing. I love this term, kind of the gen marketer or generalist or generative, because throughout my career I've used the word generalist for kind of, you know, a bit of jack of all trades, and that might also potentially be you if you're a marketing team of one within a particular organization. Some larger organizations very much go down a specialist route. You might have gone down the SEO route, for example, or data or graphic design and video. I've personally often used the term T-shaped marketer, where you have an overall broad generalism and then a deep dive specialism into one area. It's a term I like. But I think we're evolving again. And again, I think this is what makes marketing both exciting and overwhelming because of the change, is we've got so many more tools at our fingertips now, but we're not necessarily using them properly. And your example on the slide, Andy, was around like, we need to shift from, can I brief an agency, to can I build this workflow myself using no-code tools? Marketing Week have just released their kind of B2B industry research and said that agency spending has gone down significantly because it's being replaced by AI tools. And it's this shift. It's a mindset shift, not necessarily a skill set shift, but a mindset shift around the words we've been using, like curiosity, critical thinking. Instead of saying, what should we post today? How many posts should we do a week? That question still comes up. Like, what is our audience data telling us that we should be doing? What is happening at user behavior level? And another example, you know, we feel like we talk about this all the time, but honestly, I can tell you in the last 24 hours, how often should I post? What hashtag should I use? You know, those kind of questions are coming up, and also calls to action around comment if you think this. You and I, Andy, have been talking for 12 months around, no, the signals are all now about private sharing, so we should be nuancing our content to what would make someone share this and why, and that is if we understand our audience and the networks and communities that they're in as well. So I think this is not so much a skill set, I need to learn how to do this thing. Marketers have evolved, we're all familiar with technology. It is a massive mindset shift both in the individual, but also managing upwards and across and stakeholders as well about this. Because again, we did a poll, didn't we, Andy, in May of like, what do your leaders ask you? And they'll go lead gen and followers. So there's huge pieces of work for us as marketers to do, but also to educate and say, look, now we've got AI, we can do this and we can do that, and I've discovered this. So mindset shift rather than technical skills for me.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and it's still constantly surprising me as to the things that you can do now with tools. And it's again incredibly empowering or slightly uncomfortable depending on your kind of mindset. Like mindset is everything here, and we were talking about this before we went live today. Is that it is some days I'm bewildered by this all, and I spend my time in life talking about AI tools, right? And I'm still looking at like what's new, what's latest. I'm like, I can't keep up with it all.
Yeah,
it is wild. So we deliver this session fully cognizant of the fact that it is a nuts time to be a marketer. It is bewildering. It is definitely hard. So as much as like we'll say, oh, so much opportunity is all this good stuff and you should be doing this XYZ, it is hard, right? Yeah. It is definitely hard, because all of the things that we knew to be true throughout of our career, where hey, I need a team member, or hey, I need this, or I need to brief someone, etc., all of that is now on us, because we're like, actually, wait, I can
do this,
opt it into existence. I could make a no-code tool I could do a whole lead gen like thing on my website. I can turn some data into some interactive board and post that on my site, or embed it on my site and capture leads, and then automate a sales follow-up funnel. And I could do it all within a day myself. That's kind of wild to think about it. But this is also like this more on kind of like a question to those that are watching, is like, if you feel like those more kind of practical workflow type of things and like guidance is useful, do let us know, because then we can do more of that kind of weeds workflow orientated stuff. But either way, such an important, all your points you've raised, Luan, I am so on board with. And and I hate to use this phrase, because it's kind of become popularized, so it's kind of a bit meme status, but it is actually correct, which is like, AI is not going to take your job. It's using that AI will likely do, right? So it is more us thinking about, how do we work in partnership with AI? We need to still shift that mindset, which I still encounter quite a lot, which is like, oh, AI can't do this, or AI is rubbish for that. Whatever. It's not us, not humans versus the machines, right? It's like, how do we leverage this to elevate our businesses, our careers, our capabilities? So it's sometimes difficult and overwhelming, but it's got to be done. It's got to be done.
It's there. And so these three trends we've been talking about, the capabilities of AI, shifting audience behaviors, the marketing skills, again, they're not happening in isolation, colliding, reinforcing, layering, incremental. We have to adapt. I think the biggest word now, the biggest skill set is agility, isn't it? It's staying agile. Dare I say, like pre-COVID, I'm a planner. Pre-COVID, we could produce month ahead plans. We could produce annual report plans. We still need to kind of know our overall trajectory and big picture, but we are having to do so much more in the moment and responsive than ever before.
Mm-hmm. So with you. So, all right. I'm not going to spend too long on this, because I sometimes think this is, again, adds to the overwhelm when I'm just like, here's a bunch of tools you could use. These are ones that I've used personally. So I think some of these are particularly useful for achieving certain ambitions. We're going to talk through workflows a little bit more in a second. But I think this slide then talks to how we set up this conversation, which is, tools are now evolving. The utility curve and the hype cycle is kind of overlapping. Yes, there's been loads of hype, yada, yada. But now the utility is actually catching up to that hype. So here's kind of 6 that I use quite heavily. So I'll touch on Adobe Firefly in a bit. And of course, I do work for Adobe, so full disclosure and all that kind of stuff. Not incentivized to talk about it. But the point is that we're going to talk about IP and brand integrity. We do not talk about this enough. And I think this is going to become a much bigger thing in 26, but I'll let Luan kind of lead the convo on that in a second. Video content creation has changed dramatically. So if what we can imagine, we can now do. And I think that is incredibly empowering. So Sora 2 is amazing for that. Yeah, Google's VO 3.1 is really good too. So it's just amazing how we can craft things into existence. And little side note, I set my 11-year-old a little project. This is how sad we are on a Saturday morning. Well, I was like, can you, I want you to make a new advert for IKEA using some of your cuddly toys that I bought you from IKEA. So, but with a mix of both Gemini Flash 2.5, which is the image model, and Google VO3, pulled together a 30-second ad, cartoon animated ad featuring his favorite cuddly toys. I was like, it's just mind-blowing that you can do things like that. Of course, that's kind of like a more consumer-orientated use case, but whatever you can see in your mind's eye, you can get done, which is amazing. Then, talking of something like 11 Labs, we now have the opportunity to get our product into multiple markets, right? Because multiple language with perfect spoken word narratives, with face-to-speech matching. So, we could be delivering this. Really should follow my own advice sometimes. We could be delivering this webinar in German, and in German. So, that is incredible for increasing your opportunity of like the different countries you can market in, and how you can make your content more accessible to more people. This is fairly new, and I always say this, so supergrow.ai, I always say this with a bit of kind of caution, because new kind of LinkedIn tools, there are many of them. This is the best one I have seen in turning you just speak to it like you're just chatting to anyone. It gives you an amazing conversation. It's like a AI generated podcast. So an AI generated interviewer asks you such brilliant questions. It feels like going to therapy, because they ask you great questions and spits out incredible content as a result. Blown my mind, that one. So then two others. There's Replit is a very good no-code tool. This is the perfect example. I posted about this recently. You know how we all hate reporting stuff to our superiors or whomever, where they're all like, oh, tell me how we did last month or whatever. And I don't know if you've ever experienced it, but every time I've done like a report in HubSpot and tried to battle with reports in HubSpot or trying to do it in Excel, never quite get what I want. Took me so long. So for something with like Replit, and they've got this connectors thing, so it just connects into your HubSpot. You can I literally prompted it, say, give me a full deal analysis for the last 6 months of pipeline velocity, put it together, live dashboard, published it, and then leaders can look at that and it becomes an always on dashboard. That took 5 minutes. Absolutely mind-blowing stuff you can do. And finally, for Reddit Insights, never have we had it so good at understanding what people are saying about our market and our competitors at scale. Absolutely brilliant insight on competition, particular. And when you look at pain points, because if you want to do like a brand campaign targeting your competitors' weaknesses, we've never had it like so good to then find exactly what all the sentiment is when people on Reddit are hammering a competitor about a certain thing. Perfect ad orientated content right there. So yeah, very smart. Any thoughts on this one before we move on?
Yeah, I'm seeing this in action as well, like just particularly for B2B, when you can go that granular and look at your competitors and find out their weak spots, or even like what they're really talking about, and you have a counter message to it.
Yeah.
It's just so powerful. But what these slides bring to mind, again, cyclical. Back in the day, social media was new. It was like, oh, there's this tool and there's this tool, and you can plug this one in and you can link this one. If we can just remove some overwhelm, there is a million AI tools that you could be using. My approach is to almost like take that sit back, as you did, Andy, like think about your workflow, or think about, I wish it could, or I wish I had, then go and find the tool to do it. Rather than, I think, you know, there's the inclination, and again, we did this with social media, of like, oh, someone said this tool and someone said this tool, and have to keep going and experimenting with it. You will be a busy fool if you just keep playing with some tools. Try and build it into your own workflows. That whole AI is not going to replace your job, but you know how you do it, get it working within your current role. And then if you have time on a Saturday morning to challenge your kids, then that's cool as well.
Yeah, no, honestly, that's probably the most important statement that everyone will take away from this call. Don't let tools dictate. Yeah, you are so right.
But Andy, if you posted the output, I bet it would be the most popular social media post you ever did.
Probably. It was.
Sorry.
That was brilliant. You know, so yeah, to give you an idea of workflows, what it could look is like this. If we were thinking about something that would work well for kind of B2B, again, this is just an example. Doesn't mean go ahead and use all these tools because you have to. Just an example. You know, firstly, deep research, gather all these insights, whether it's Reddit insights, ChatGPT, Claude, download your competitors' ads, basically chuck as much as you can into a big mixing pot. For me personally, for the kind of personal stuff that I do on the side, I have one massive like Google Drive folder with just every random bit of insight and knowledge that I've carved out over the years. And that is like the central like corpus of information. I think that's probably the most important thing to start with. Just like try and centralize all of this stuff that might live in CRMs, in kind of, you know, feedback surveys as much as you can. The great thing is you don't really need to organize it in that corpus of information. It just needs to be there. You know, it could be in a big doc. Then it can be fed into AI tools with all of the insight stuff that we've been speaking about. Finding those insights then could go into something like, okay, let's see how we can create great social content for LinkedIn in particular, feeding that insight, of which would still have to go through a human filter between here and here, right? Because you still got to articulate what those insights are. It's important that like this is human in the loop. This isn't just feeding insights into, you know, a content production farm. That's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is empowering us with that insight that we can then synthesize what we're learning in step one, and then we can express it in step two, which will then help us spit out content at scale. And then, you know, of course, we still need this to feel on brand. So as we start to like generate some imagery or video related to our content, and we're concerned about IP, that's where kind of Adobe Firefly sits into it. Already spoken a little bit about Replit, but I'm conscious of time. So yeah. I really want to dig into this.
Yes, I think, you know, we have talked about, and there's probably most of you have been nodding along, no doubt, you know, it's exciting, there's opportunities, but there is challenges, of course, around AI. And there's a couple of things in the chat around, yes, it gets things wrong. We've talked about trust, sphere of influence, but, you know, we all know about IP, responsible use of AI, untick if the platforms are going to use your data for training. Actually read something this morning that LinkedIn, you might see a pop-up at some point. LinkedIn is going to be asking people to be human filters on AI training as well, and they'll pay you for it. So have a look, they'll be rolling that out. But it is very much about responsible marketing. It is about protecting your IP. Having an AI policy within your organization that is potentially very agile as well, because things are always changing. Thinking about what are you inputting? I'll let Andy talk about the copyright of the output as well. But ultimately, this is about being transparent. If you're using AI, tell people you're using AI. Tick the boxes when you're uploading things to social media. Tell people that you're using it with data. Get permissions as well. I said my area of work around this at the moment, I'm collaborating with a cybersecurity AI experts around those topics, privacy and the world of social media, what it means, but to put a positive output on it of going, this is what's happening, but this is what you can do to stay in as much control as you can, or at least to have an awareness about it. And ultimately, the phrase is about being more digital literate. Yourself, colleagues, internally, friends and family, we have to have an awareness of this is huge volumes of data in terms of inputs, outputs within these tools. So it is about, again, thinking about it and applying your own human lens to this all the way through.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we spent so long talking about trust, and it's just going to become even more important. And whilst amidst all the excitement of AI and the opportunity that we've been speaking about, for anything that relates to content production and outputs with AI, the bit that we haven't spoken about enough is like attribution and data integrity. Where does this amazing output come from, right?
Yeah.
So, that incredible cartoon that my kids generated, it looked great because it actually looked quite similar to another cartoon, right? And that's because I've plagiarized someone else's work, quite frankly. It's amazing. It's like, wow, what an output. But ultimately, this is someone else's work that I've used. And whilst this is still an incredibly like gray area, no one's really talking about enough because we're still in this hype cycle of, oh, look at all this opportunity. Isn't this wow and wonderful? And that's where there's just not enough knowledge here at this point as to like, is that actually my content? Could I license it? Does it belong to me? And the answer to all of those, unless you're using Adobe Firefly, is no. It isn't yours. It isn't brand safe. It has been trained on other content. So if you're using it for personal reasons and from chucking it out on your own personal social profiles, yeah, fine. It's fair game. It is what it is. But when we're talking about it from like a brand point of view, then that is a very real, like that's a different thing, right? And we need to be aware that isn't what we'd class as brand safe. And that's why kind of again, this is not a sales pitch, but it's just important for everyone to know, like that's why all the outputs you'd get from Adobe Firefly are all tagged with metadata linked to what's called content credentials. And you'll start to see this little kind of like CR message in the top right of any AI generated content across all platforms, because people are agreeing around a global standard of content credentials, which is basically like your attribution layer of AI generated content, telling you where it's come from, the kind of training data that's helped build that. And the only reason that we could make Adobe Firefly in this way is that we had to get every bit of training data has been licensed, and the creators that have helped us train it have been paid, and unfortunately, like big tech hasn't really followed suit in this. So it's a bit of a wild west, if I'm honest. Lots of amazing things that you can do from an output point of view. It doesn't mean it's all bad. It's just we just need to be very mindful. And I think no more so than what I've seen a growth of, which I cannot get on board with personally, which the growth of like AI UGC. Oh, that makes me feel all kinds of wrong. So
I think there's just a real balance here of the word responsible, being a responsible marketer, ethical understanding, and what's right, fair, legal, decent, honest, and truthful. The state of the nation at the moment, there is regulation coming into play, but as we know in the world of tech, that regulation and the regulators, it's very difficult to keep up. Every state, every country has different regulations as well. So even though we think that the internet is universal, regulations are not universal, which is why we're seeing different things and different opportunities in different countries as well. So it is constantly evolving, and regulation cannot keep up with it, just as it hasn't kept up with social media or anything else. I've read a lot of regulatory documents over the last few months, and you write about it and then it changes. But we'll be bringing that to you next year. Thank you for those that have watched it live. This has been a popular session, and there's some notes in the chat. But really what we want, I think, our output of this session, and we could run this again in 3 weeks' time, and probably our narrative will be different because we'll have different contexts and experiences. There are shifts. The technology itself, audience behaviours, us as marketers as well, keep learning, keep iterating, having those internal conversations as well. It's impossible, even as Andy and I said, we live and breathe reading the news and have the privilege perhaps to do that, compared to some others as well, like diving deep into this and trying to make some sense of it. But it's impossible to keep up. So start with one tool, use it strategically, learn about your audience, iterate. Don't use it for churning out content. That isn't a quick win. It's not great use of time. This is not about creating more and more content. It's not about volume. And that's, again, one of those, how often should we post and how many posts should we do? It's about quality and engagement and talking to humans as well. And we think ultimately those who are going to win are going to use AI to become more human, more strategic, and more connected to what their audiences need.
Love that.
I don't know about you, Andy. I feel better now.
Yeah. Off our chest.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, if you found this useful, because it's a bit of a different thing, Luan and I put this together on a whim based on some conversation that was in our WhatsApp group and what we've seen. So, of course, all of this could be explored more. So if like certain tools or workflows or going deeper into IP, if any of those sound interesting, you want to deep dive, then we could definitely do some more sessions. But yeah, other than that, if you found, sorry, flicking back to this, but yeah, if you found any of this useful and fancy meeting up in person to talk about this stuff, then you know where you can find us.
Find us in London. Thanks, Andy. We will catch up soon.
Definitely. Thanks so much, everyone. See you soon.
Bye.